Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous days. Today we have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And before we start, I would like to make several announcements. Once again, I would like to remind you that I'm on a short vacation that will be finished by the 6th of August of 2025, and I will return back to normal work by the 7th of August of 2025. So just today, just a short update, just to stay tuned with the situation in Ukraine. Of course, we have two important updates, two important areas. The first one is the city of Pokrovsk, where the Russians continue their breaking through operation, and not just breaking through, but also outflanking operation in the northeastern part. And we have the city of Decisive. So this video would like to start with the city of Decisive because we have lots of very interesting data, lots of very interesting updates. I'd like to remind you that yesterday the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation reported that as a result of clashes, as a result of combat operations, units of the Group of Forces South managed to establish complete control over the city by the name of Decisive. A bit later, the Russians published this video where we can see how exactly the Russians were taking under control the city, and we have probably dozens of episodes of how the Russians were raising their flags in different parts of the city. So no doubts that the city of Decisive was taken by the Russians. No doubts that Ukrainians were forced to fall back. The Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, tried to make several statements about the situation, telling us that the Russians made the false video that they raised flags and then they were forced to fall back, that there are still Ukrainian soldiers on the territory of the city of Decisive. Telling the truth, we have no doubts that there are still pockets of resistance on the territory of the city that the Russians are trying to clear, and most likely in coming days the Ukrainians will try to carry out several counter-offensive operations with the purpose to answer the city of Decisive once again, no matter the losses and no matter the price they're going to pay for this, with the purpose just to raise several flags and to show the world that the city of Decisive is still, or at least partially, under complete Ukraine control. So, but anyway, this will not change the situation. The Russians established complete control over the territory. But when talking about the city of Decisive, we have lots of very interesting details. For example, yesterday in the evening, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation reported that as a result of clashes for the city of Decisive, the Ukrainians lost 7,500 soldiers since the beginning of battle. And telling the truth, this is the most minimal losses from the Ukrainian side since the beginning of the special military operation. For example, the first battle of the special military operation was the battle of the city of Mariupol in the southern part of Ukraine. And according to information we have, the Russians reported us more than 3 years ago that as a result of clashes for Mariupol, Ukrainians lost up to 22,000 soldiers during the battle for the city. Later, we got numbers, for example, for the battle of the city of Bakhmut, where Ukrainians, according to the PMC Wagner, lost around 75,000 soldiers during the battle for the city. For example, during the battle for the Lysychansk agglomeration, the losses were also around 15, 20, 25,000 soldiers or something like this. So now we see that Ukrainians during the battle for the city of Decisive that have taken place more than a year, lost just 7,500 soldiers, and we can say that based on the numbers provided by the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, the battle of the city of Decisive was the most well-performed battle defense operation from the Ukrainian side. The losses are minimal, but the value are the highest as never. Now the Russians have no barriers, have no problems to move further in the southwestern direction with the purpose to attack the city of Kostiantynivka itself from the northwest. But telling the truth, this is not the only road of attack, this is not the only way how the Russians can attack the Ukrainians. And it seems that the Russians will try to probably to increase the line of combat contact by moving first of all in the northwestern direction towards the settlement by the name of Drushkovka. This will allow the Russians to increase the length of the line of combat contact, which will cause damage to Ukrainian logistic and to Ukrainian defense line itself. Anyway, let's wait and see what is going to be next. And the most important thing, that most likely the city of Chasiv Yar fell in Russian hands several days ago, but they announced about this just today because the Russians are ready to move further. And most likely these days we're going to receive first updates about the situation in Kostiantynivka. So that is why it would be illogical if we got first flags from the city of Kostiantynivka without the announcement of the victory of the city of Chasiv Yar. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the area of the city of Pokrovsk, where the Russians continue their offensive operation. There are two critical points in defense of the armed forces of Ukraine: the southwestern part of the city and of the Pokrovsk agglomeration, and the northeastern part of the Pokrovsk agglomeration. For example, when talking about the southwestern part, we still have some problems between different camps of pro-Ukrainian, pro-Russian sources, because it's still very difficult to understand whether the Russians establish complete control over the southwestern part of this area. We're talking about the settlements like Lyantovich, Troyanda, and of course M30 road, and the central part of the city of Pokrovsk itself. So currently we have lots of geolocations already, lots of geolocations from the central part of the city where we can see how Ukrainians were attacking Russians. There are not so many videos where we can see Russian soldiers themselves in the central part, but we have lots of videos of how Ukrainians attack possible Russian positions. So this is the very interesting situation. Since the beginning of the battle of the city of Pokrovsk, we got lots of geolocations. For example, the previous video shown us Ukrainian attack on the central part with drone. In this video we can see another attack with Ukrainian drone on the Russian positions, but two videos but without even a single Russian soldier on the scene, which means that everything is not so clear. So we have lots of mappers, we have lots of adjustments. For example, this is the map that was provided by several very reliable pro-Russian sources, and as you can see, they show that indeed the Russians have their presence in the central part of the city, but we're talking not about 100 and stable foothold. We're talking just about roads and islands of resistance on the territory of the city, its central part, from the Russian side. There are very, very heavy clashes from the central part of the city of Pokrovsk, and despite the fact that the Russians shown their presence, or the Ukrainians shown us the presence of the Russians in the central part, it doesn't mean that the Russians have 100 strong control over the territory. Currently there are very heavy clashes. For this, the Russians are trying to do everything they can with the purpose to improve their positions, to dig in deeper, and to save control over the territory. This is very important, and we need to understand that Ukrainians understand this as well. They understand if the Russians are able to dig in deeper, if the Russians are able to establish complete control over the southwestern part of the city of Pokrovsk, this is going to be the biggest disaster ever. And everybody remember about the 10 days ultimatum made by the President of the United States of America, Donald Trump. And telling the truth, I believe that the deadline is 8th of August according to him, but if you ask my opinion, I believe that somewhere by the 4th or by the 3rd of August of 2025 he will reduce this ultimatum for another 2 or 3 days. So 10 days until 8th of August is too much for the United States of America. Most likely Donald Trump will reduce this because he see that his ultimatums plays good with markets and so on. So another reduction of ultimatum can bring him billions. So this is the situation, the southwestern part. And of course, the northeastern part, when talking about the situation in this area, I see that everything is much worse for the Ukrainians in comparison with the southwestern flank of the Pokrovsk agglomeration. The thing is that Ukrainians lost control over the main supply lines, and the defense belt of the armored forces of Ukraine collapsed completely. The Russians, using their pairs of stormtroopers 2-3 soldiers, were able to move as deep as possible inside of the territory of Ukraine and destroying Ukrainian logistic and Ukrainian defense. So according to information we have, as a result of clashes, the Russians cut the settlement of Rodinska from the north. So Ukrainians lost one of the most important supply line in this area. Furthermore, the Russians answered this small mine and this small settlement by the name of Dorozhnya. The Russians improved their positions further in the northwestern direction towards the settlement of Novo and Vilna. And the Russians, of course, continued their offensive operation in the direction of Vladimirovka. So we are not talking about 100% control over the territory. We're just talking about islands of resistance, or more precisely, islands of sabotage and reconnaissance operations. Probably it's better combination of words that can describe the situation to the north of the city and the agglomeration of Pokrovsk. The islands of sabotage and resistance from the Russian side. The main purpose of these islands is to ruin Ukrainian logistic and to create a picture, to create the situation that Ukrainians can think that everything have already collapsed and that it's time for them to fall back from this area. So, of course, we are waiting for additional updates about the situation in this area. And, of course, this is a turning point in the special military operation because, as we discussed in the previous videos, if the Ukrainians are not able to carry out any counter-offensive operation in coming days, maybe not in the city of Pokrovsk or in the city of Chasiv, but somewhere else, probably the northeastern part of Kharkiv Oblast, they will never be able to do this anymore until the end of the special military operation, which is going to be very important and something like a red flag for the Western investors, that it's time to start talks with Russians with the purpose to save as much as possible and to share with the Russians at least everything that they have right now. As for the other directions, according to information we have today, we got report, for example, from the group of Forces North, that the Russians crossed the river of Volcha in the southeastern part of the city of Volchansk, and they managed to secure this part of the settlement. As for the Sumy direction, the Ukrainians continued their counter-offensive operation, and during the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians managed to restore control over the territory around Kondratovka and Andreevka. It seems that Ukrainians are planning their offensive operation further in the direction of Alexeyevka. And as for the southern directions, the Russians continue their offensive operation in Stepnogorsk. There are very heavy clashes and the Russians expanding their positions significantly. It seems that Ukrainians are not able to stabilize the situation. It seems the Ukrainians are going to rely on the natural barriers when talking about defense, in the line where the Ukrainians are going to slow down or at least to stop the Russians. And that's it for the holiday video. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes on my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.